Zigong asked, "How is a person who is poor without being obsequious and rich without being arrogant?" Confucius replied, "That's all right, but not as good as being poor and enjoying the way of virtue, or being rich and valuing ritual and propriety." Zigong then said, "The book of poetry mentions shaping horn and jade, needing constant chiseling and polishing to achieve refinement. Is this what you mean?" Confucius replied, "Zigong, we can now discuss the book of poetry. Let me tell you one thing and you can infer another." Zigong was one of Confucius's best students. He posed the question of how one should conduct oneself when poor without being obsequious and when wealthy without being arrogant. We all know that when people are in poverty, they may easily resort to flattery, while wealth can lead to arrogance and pride. So Zigong's perspective on being poor without being obsequious and rich without being arrogant is quite reasonable. Zigong himself experienced the journey from poverty to wealth, having been poor in his youth and later finding success in business. This demonstrates that Confucius was not against commerce. His students were free to engage in business and earn wealth as long as they had the capability. So Zigong consulted Confucius about these two behaviors. Confucius responded that they were all right, but not as good as being poor while enjoying the path of virtue, or being wealthy while valuing ritual and propriety. Today, our society has become prosperous, so there is a particularly important phrase: wealth while valuing ritual. In ancient times, rituals required a financial foundation, as they involved reciprocal practices and maintaining a certain standard. Regarding the saying, "poor and enjoying the path of virtue," some versions simply say "poor and enjoying without the path of virtue." We have included virtue because it appears in the records of the grand historian biographies of Confucius's disciples, and because the path of virtue plays a significant role in the teachings of Confucius. Also in the book, Zhuangzi mentions Zigong and other students such as Zilu, who felt that their teacher's ideals could not be realized, possibly indicating some issue with themselves. However, Yan Yuan believed their teacher had no problems. Later, Confucius advised Yan Yuan to consider becoming an official, to which Yan Yuan responded by emphasizing that he could find joy in his teacher's teachings. This is an example of poor and enjoying the path of virtue. Otherwise, how could one be happy while being poor? But with the concept of virtue, happiness is possible. In Confucianism, virtue is a crucial concept that helps us understand the purpose of life. The joy of inner peace and the pursuit of virtue far outweigh any external achievements. Understanding the reason for happiness and why doing good can bring joy, the concept of virtue is precisely the reason for our happiness. One of the unique aspects of Confucius's teaching was that students needed to shift from a negative to a positive perspective. Simply telling students not to do wrong was not enough. They also needed guidance on how to do good. This is the transition from negative to positive. Confucius was teaching his student Zigong, who responded by quoting a line from the book of poetry, which said that just like shaping horn and jade, one must continually chisel and polish to achieve refinement. Zigong noted this was what Confucius meant. Today we still speak of refining and polishing, aiming to improve upon the original state. Since Zigong's question was about being poor without being obsequious and rich without being arrogant, Confucius emphasized going further, poor and enjoying the path of virtue, and rich and valuing ritual and propriety. Zigong immediately referenced a line from the book of poetry, which pleased Confucius. He said, "Zigong, we can now discuss the book of poetry. Let me tell you one thing, and you can infer another." Zigong's full name was Duan Muqi, and Confucius would address his students by their given names. Thus he called Zigong Ci. Similarly, Yan Yuan was referred to as Hui, and Zilu as Yu. This manner of address is often found in the Analects. Confucius's students gradually grew from ordinary individuals to accomplished ones through learning. Sima Qian noted that there were 72 individuals among Confucius's students who excelled in the 6 arts. These were the exceptional 70 disciples known for their mastery of the 6 arts. Zigong was particularly skilled in eloquence, so if we wish to learn about effective communication, we should pay close attention to how Zigong interacted with his teacher, discussed questions, and expressed his thoughts. From this passage, we learn that in any endeavor, one should shift from negative to positive action and undertake meaningful efforts. As Confucius said, when you see someone who is not virtuous, examine yourself. It's not enough just to reflect on whether you share the same shortcomings. You must also strive to emulate the virtuous. This teaching approach is universally applicable. A great teacher like Confucius emphasized the importance of shifting from negative to positive, from what one shouldn't do to proactive action. When one is poor, they may feel helpless, so how can they be happy? They must have a path to follow to find joy. Understanding one's life's direction may not always lead to external achievements, no matter how hard one tries. In such cases, one must follow the righteous path and strive toward goodness. Thus, striving for goodness is the fundamental requirement of human nature. By adhering to goodness, one can attain a higher state of being. If one achieves moral perfection, the external gains and losses become insignificant. In studying Confucianism, we hope to make positive contributions to society, but we must also consider timing, fate, and luck. For Confucius, he lacked such opportunities, serving as an official for only 5 years. Whenever he had the chance to make a difference, he faced various obstacles, eventually leading him to travel to different states. Traveling through various states did not mean Confucius was discouraged. He was trying to spread his teachings and ideals so that the people of various states could understand his philosophy. In the Zhou dynasty, scholars could travel between states and express their ideals. As long as someone offered them a position, they could carry out the path of virtue, thereby strengthening the Zhou dynasty and stabilizing society. As for being rich and valuing ritual, that is ideal. In modern times, as society becomes more prosperous and affluent, this concept becomes increasingly important. Otherwise, wealth without cultural literacy can result in a rough demeanor, setting a poor example for society. Thus, those who are wealthy are known as the rich, and those with high status are called the noble. In the homes of the rich and the noble, particular attention must be paid to rituals, etiquette, and manners. Zigong experienced poverty in his youth and later found wealth. This allowed him to reflect on how to manage his life and conduct himself in both poverty and wealth, adhering to a consistent set of principles. Confucian thought emphasizes consistent principles with the focus on the internal rather than the external. Otherwise, if external circumstances change and one loses internal principles as a result, it would be a failure of Confucian education. By studying Zigong's teachings, we can gain many insights.